Oh, hey, brothers and sisters. Well, this video is going to be about the man of lawlessness. I've introduced this topic a few times, and I thought, well, I'll just do the whole Bible study on it. And I guess because it's the holidays and um, my computer got a little too much time in my hands, I tried doing something a little bit more uh, graphically fun. Um, you can definitely tell I don't have skills for doing this, but so we're going to take a look at. Uh, I'll put it the way I see the man of lawlessness or the Antichrist from a biblical perspective. And, if you'll hang with me to the end, hopefully, the passage I present and the concepts I present are at least weighted equal in your mind with some of the other scenarios that are out there right now. So the first thing I wanted to do is talk about what the Antichrist in Greek really means. And the word Antichrist is made up of two roots. Anti um, not only can mean against and opposite of, but also in place of. And I think that's going to be important in this study in particular. And then Christ we know as the Messiah. So that's the key thing, though, is it's not only he's against Christ and the opposition of Christ, but he's in place of Christ. So let's go first to one of the things that people assume they know what the answer is, but I'll suggest that maybe they don't. And here's just a graphic I got. Now, if we read this passage, in the city lieth four square, and the length is as large as the breadth. And he measured this city with a reed, 12,000 furlongs. The length and the breadth and the height of it are equal. And we talked about this before, but it's something like 13,000 plus miles, length, width, and height. But as you can see here, a couple of shapes would match the four square notion with length, width, and height. So it doesn't have to be a cube, it could be a pyramid. And I think that's intriguing here because if you think about the prior statement about Antichrist, he's doing things in the place of Christ, and we know throughout the Bible, Satan's always trying to copy the things of God. So keep that in the back of your brain. So here we got an example, and somebody else obviously had thought about the same thing here. We've got the New Jerusalem, which is coming down to heaven, and that's what was being described there with the length, width, and height being the same, and just a more visual representation of it. So if Satan was going to copy it, would it be a surprise then if it was this? And many people are very familiar with the symbology of the Illuminati in the back of our dollar, and you have, their Messiah, and notice the sunburst around the eye, and then the pyramid base. And so the question then becomes, the popular option today is taking a look at has Barack Obama fit that? Now let's just read our passage. For thou sayest in thy heart, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High, yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit. And so you can see it's a prideful, he's going to be as good as, or he's going to be like the Most High. And so we got to figure out here, a lot of people say Obama's the guy that fits the bill, and I've been talking about Nimrod back in the book of Genesis, who comes forward and is called all sorts of other things later in the Bible as after the dispersion from the Tower of Babel, when the languages were confused, the name of Nimrod took on a whole bunch of different names in the different cultures, like Baal and Marduk and so on and so on. So here's the question, and I think for the people that watch my videos, I lean this way here. So We get this pivotal passage here in Daniel 9:26, and after 62 weeks, the Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined. And why this is important is the people of the prince that shall come were the Roman armies, and so we're looking for the prince of the Roman Empire, and so that's where we got to be looking. Now, what we've got is, you know, people claim that this is authentic here. I took an image of it. It's Barack Obama's real birth certificate from Kenya. If you go on YouTube, you can search leading up to his 2008 election. Michelle Obama, in particular, had 2 or 3 speeches where she talked about how proud the people of Kenya were to have Barack Obama, somebody from their country, representing the presidency of the United States. And so, you know, some people still think this is conspiracy theory, but there's just more and more evidence every day that there was quite the deception here that happened. But he is not the Antichrist, is my opinion, because he's from Kenya, and it would be hard to tie him to the Roman Empire in any way. So here's the part wherein the people of the prince that shall come were the Romans that destroyed the city and the sanctuary. And here you can see the Roman soldiers. Here you can see the actual, I guess it's, you know, was a relief of the temple, you know, the menorah and all that being carried away by the Romans back to Rome after the destruction of the temple. And here you get a little artist rendition of what that destruction looked like. So we're looking for something. The Antichrist has this affiliation where he is the prince of the Roman people, and that's where we got to look. And I don't think Obama fits that bill. So here we got some notion. Now again, this is controversial because the new pope is so popular. But let's just read through our verses here. So we're looking for that prince that shall come. And now let's look a little more insight here. And deceiveth them that dwell upon the earth by means of those miracles. Now this is talking about the false prophet, which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on earth, that they should make an image of the beast, which had the wound by a sword and did live. And he had the power to give life unto the image of the beast, and that image of the beast should both speak and cause. As many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And that's where I think we start to get our indication of what to look for. Now the popes here, many people that study what's going on, including Vatican insiders that have come out that talk about that, especially since the Vatican II, but if you go all the way back to the Jesuits in the last few hundred years and before that, with the Inquisitions and the like, the popes that really had, you know, I hate to say it, but it's satanic worship. And we see all sorts of symbolism. I only put a couple of images up here, but you can see that it's sun worship, and the sun worship comes right out of pagan worship that was in Egypt, and before that it goes all the way back to Babylon. And many times we made the point that, you know, it goes right back to the original Babylon, again at the Tower of Babel and Nimrod. And Eye of Horus would definitely be one of the symbols representing that we see very common today with the Illuminati. And you can see the sunburst. And again, now people talk about Semiramis, Horus, and Nimrod in this symbol. and yet I think this, it has other, obviously, interpretation, but you can see definitely there's quite the coincidence in terms of symbology that the Catholic Church still uses today. And here's the prior point now. You can see the sun symbol. It goes back into Egypt, of course. You can see that's the sun symbol sitting on their head in these reliefs. And you can see the notion of I guess it's the phoenix or whatever. And again, here's a picture of Marduk or Nimrod, the Babylonian king that came right out of Babylon. And you can see again, it's, the person and, some representation of the wings and all that. So he was considered to be a god man, and we see in Genesis that Nimrod became a Gabor, which was a giant, and the giants were the Nephilim, the crossbreeding between earthly women and the fallen angels. And so I think you can see how this all kind of ties together. And then you can see here another picture that was taken off of one of the Babylonian drawings, and then they just put the different names on here. And so if you go all the way back, Nimrod, also called Marduk, Baal in the Bible, is Satan, and that's what the sun god worship was about. So let's look at our passages here. And this man shall be the peace. The Assyrian shall come into our land, and when he shall tread in our palaces, then we shall raise against him 7 shepherds and 8 principal men. And they shall waste the land of Assyria with the sword, and the land of Nimrod in the entrances thereof. Thus shall he deliver us from the Syrian when he cometh into our land, and when he treadeth in our borders. And so in these passages here, we see that there's a person called the Assyrian, and Nimrod was the original one that ruled over the land of Assyria and the cities. And then we see here the one that this is an end times thing, that really the Messiah is going to deliver them from the Assyrian. And it's in the land of Nimrod. And so that's important. So we see here how we get to the end times return of the Antichrist being some form of the return of this Nimrod character. And we see all sorts of references here that they'll be in the land of Nimrod, which would again be, the Iraq. So let's take a look then. A few more characteristics here. So we just read about the Assyrian coming into the land, and that he shall deliver us from it. That would be the Messiah. Let's look at Daniel 11 now. And the king shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the gods, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished. For that which is determined shall be done. Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any God, for he shall magnify himself above all. And, again, if you think about all the videos out there about Barack Obama being the Antichrist, you see the very first thing Barack Obama did when he became president is he went on what was called the apology tour. But he's bowing to the Pope, he's bowing to the Saudi Arabian King Abdullah, and he's bowing to the Japanese Prime Minister, I think that is there. And so, it isn't the prideful exalting himself and magnifying himself in terms of what he's doing. And he's recently, crippled the United States militarily and positioned us against China and Russia, where many people now say that Vladimir Putin is the world's superpower leader, and that America has basically fallen because of the actions of what's been going on here with our president. So I think that's another indication that he doesn't fit the passages from the Bible, especially this Daniel 11:36. but this Nimrod character sure would have. So you can see the Tower of Babel behind him there, and the prideful arrogance. So he fits. Okay, so now we're over here looking at Jeremiah. Thus the slain shall fall in the land of the Chaldeans, and they that are thrust through in her streets. For Israel hath not been forsaken, nor Judah of his God, of the Lord of hosts. Through their land was filled with sin against the Holy One of Israel. Flee out of the midst of Babylon, and deliver every man his soul. Be not cut off in her iniquity, for this is the time of the Lord's vengeance. He will render unto her a recompense. Babylon hath been a golden cup in the Lord's hand, that made all the earth drunken. The nations have drunken her wine, therefore the nations are mad. And picked out these verses here because we're getting into that question of, where is this Babylon, or mystery Babylon, whatever you want to say. And a popular one is to say America or New York City, or some combination thereof. And so let's just take a look. I've shown clips of Jonathan Kleck's videos before, because I think he does a great job showing us something that's significant on our monetary notes, but doesn't mean his conclusion is that means America or New York is the biblical Babylon. Let's take a look at one of his videos here.
So is the end. World War III is upon us.
Okay, so you see kind of that rendition of it, and I see presumably there New York getting tidal wave. A nuke goes off in the ocean, creates a tsunami coming in, and destroys the city. So that doesn't match up for me with the land of the Chaldeans, and people, could be fleeing out of the midst of that. But let's take a look at a few other passages, since I don't agree with that scenario. Now we got the sound of battle is in the land, and of great destruction. How is the hammer of the whole earth cut asunder and broken? How is Babylon become a desolation among the nations? Call together the archers against Babylon, all that bend the bow. Camp against it round about, let none thereof escape. Recompense her according to her work, according to all that she hath done. Do unto her, for she hath been proud against the Lord, against the Holy One of Israel. Therefore shall her young men fall in the streets, and all of her men of war shall be cut off in that day, saith the Lord. Behold, I am against thee, O thou most proud, saith the Lord God of hosts. For thy day is come, the time that I will visit thee, and the most proud shall stumble and fall, and none shall rise up. And I will kindle a fire in his cities, and it shall devour all around about him. And this we know is an end times passage. There's a few reasons in here. The first time Babylon was taken back in 530, whatever, 6 BC, something like that. The Medo-Persians under King Cyrus came in, and they slipped in under the gate. That was during the handwriting on the wall deal in the book of Daniel, and it wasn't a big fire and a big fight. Matter of fact, the city of Babylon remained intact for hundreds of years later and slowly fell into disrepair and decay. And so this is definitely describing something different. And Babylon here is seen as a great city again, and it's going to become a desolation. And the other thing that we get is that, you know, um, it's surrounded by the enemies, and then we get God will kindle a fire in his cities and shall devour all around about him. And again, that doesn't quite fit New York. I mean, if a big wave's coming in destroying New York, it's not kindling a fire, and it's not destroying all the cities that are around him. So I'm just going to say that I don't think that's uh, in any way supporting the New York or America is Babylon kind of a scenario. So uh, I'm thinking a little bit more that when we say the land of Chaldeans, you know, all the Bible prophecy that has been fulfilled was literal and specific. And here in Jeremiah 51, you know, we see that it's the land of the Chaldeans that we're talking about, and Chaldeans is tied in verse 6 to the midst of Babylon. And so we're not talking about America, we're talking about Babylon and Iraq. So let's see if this works here. Just Babylon and Iraq. And there you go. Babel, Iraq. So I think that's the real story. Okay. Now let's go back to this idea of that there's a antichrist, and again, it's not just against or opposing, but it's in the place of, because I think we can start now um, putting together the scenario and seeing how the Antichrist and Satan would put the Antichrist in the place of Christ, and how he could mimic this thing coming into the end times, trying to pull some of these pieces together. So here we've got a slide. It's a little thick here, but the part that I want to get into passage-wise is just reminding ourselves again here how the Lord is going to bring his city, New Jerusalem, down to earth. New Jerusalem, which cometh down out of heaven. And who's it for? It's for his people, the church, that have returned after our presumably 7 years in heaven with him. And so, would Satan's, I guess the premise is, if Satan's trying to rip this off, would the Antichrist come down with a city out of heaven to earth? I know that sounds kind of crazy, but if you look out at what's at Babylon right now, there's some ceremonial cities, but it's not, you know, the city that all the merchants of the world would be bringing their goods to. Somehow we have to have a city show up, you know, pretty much overnight, and you know, be up and functioning in that 7 year tribulation period. And so here's what I'm going to start to talk about now. Is you got the Vatican's got the Advanced Technology Telescope in Mount Graham, and way back probably 20 years ago or so, famous interviewer Art Bell had a program on called Coast to Coast, and he interviewed Father Malachi Martin, and we'll talk about him in a minute. But the interview got into this, you know, what is going on with the Vatican here, and this observatory that was being built, this one he was talking about, and what would they have done with that is what Art Bell's asking him. And then Malachi Martin says, because of the mentality, the attitude, the mentality amongst those who are at the highest levels of Vatican administration and geopolitics, know the knowledge of what's going on in space and what's approaching us could be of great import in the next 5 to 10 years. And so you can go back, like I say, even 20 years ago. Yeah, well, so Malachi Martin died in 1999. So it's at least back into the 90s and maybe a little bit earlier that he was making these statements. And let's just talk a little bit about Malachi Martin. So he was a Jesuit priest. He became professor of paleontology at the Vatican's Pontifical Biblical Institute. And he also served as theological advisor to one of the cardinals during the Second Vatican Council. Okay, and so he got disillusioned by the reforms. He was released of his Jesuit vows in '64 and moved to New York. He wrote 17 novels and nonfiction books, which were frequently critical of the Catholic Church, which he believed had failed to act on the third prophecy supposedly revealed by the Virgin Mary at Fatima. And if you want to plug that into Google and do some research, there's a few stunning things that he was saying. This is one of them that, expecting something very significant, the highest levels of the Vatican administration, of something coming from space approaching us. And then the second set of things that I found super significant is he actually alludes to that just after the Second Vatican Council in the 60s there, that the smoke of Satan entered the Vatican, and that it was evidenced by satanic rites and satanic pedophilia. And we've heard about the pedophilia in the Catholic Church for quite a while now, and what Malachi Martin pointed to was that this is the satanic worship and the black rites that were going on in the Catholic Church, which seems stunning, but so does looking for UFOs and all that. And so there's got to be something up with this. I think the world's biggest, if you want to say, denomination of professing Christianity. A lot of people would doubt the true intent there, but professing Christianity is caught up in all this stuff now. Satanic worship, looking for aliens coming from space, that is of the most important. And I don't know. So let's listen to this little interview here from Tom Horn and Chris Putnam. This is actually Chris Putnam being interviewed about their research into what the Vatican is doing and why they've got these telescopes and what this could all mean. So here, hang on.
All right, we're talking to Chris Putnam, author extraordinaire. Now, Chris, before we went into the break, we were talking about how the Vatican is either in search of or believes in extraterrestrials, and yes, we're talking about the actual ET kind, so much so that they've devoted resources to it, money, scientists, and they've even come out and said, yeah, man, we're getting ready to baptize these little green guys. Let's do this. What's their position? Why are they doing it?
Well, I think that, from the sorts of statements that we see and the investment they have in the project, that they believe in it, and they're trying to get out ahead of it theologically. And, even like people that are the ufologists, people that, are UFOs into the UFO field, like Richard Dolan, who has written several books. His recent book, After Disclosure, has a whole section where, they notice that the Vatican has positioned themselves basically to be the theological emissaries if there is an alien disclosure event. I don't know if your listeners are aware, but, the Vatican has a astronomical observatory called the Vatican Advanced Technology Telescope on top of Mount Graham in Arizona. Now, this is called the Mount Graham International Observatory Complex, and it was sponsored by the University of Arizona, which has one of the largest astronomy programs in the country and one of the few astrobiology programs. And so they have this international observatory complex up on top of this mountain, and Arizona is an ideal location if you think about the fact that you have a mountain that's in the middle of a desert. So the desert is particularly dry, and then you have the elevation of a mountain where you get up really close, as close as you can to the edge of the atmosphere. And the fact that there's not as much moisture as you would have in other areas creates a clearer type of image, because moisture in the atmosphere distorts and it creates a lensing effect. So it's an ideal sort of location. And so the Vatican actually has one of the most advanced technology telescopes in the world, in that at the University of Arizona they pioneered a new mirror technology. And this is what really fueled this project. Now, the whole facility on Mount Graham has been very controversial because it's this mountain, Mount Graham, is actually a holy mountain of the Western Apache Indians. The San Carlos Apache tribe has been protesting it all along. But there's been some real...
What was that? Are you there, Chris?
Yes. Did something happen?
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what it was, but something happened.
Okay. Well, the Western Apache and some environmentalists have been protesting the Mount Graham Observatory the whole time, but it kind of got in-run through Congress, where they bypassed all the environmental laws, and actually Congress legislated the permits to build this thing. So it's been a very controversial project. It actually was aired in the United States.
So, Chris, what do you think these UFOs are? I mean, are they military aircraft? Are they, little green men from far, far away? What do you think these are?
Well, there's always a danger when you're generalizing something, because
sure.
The UFO means unidentified, right? But, most
sure.
of the time people are talking about a flying saucer or some kind of otherworldly craft or something they don't recognize as something, conventional. And, I think it's more than one thing sometimes, so it's hard to be precise, but I really do think that a large part of the unidentified portion of this phenomenon is associated with the powers and principalities that the Apostle Paul talks about in Ephesians chapter 6. Now, for your listeners that aren't familiar with what I'm talking about, these would be fallen angels or demonic entities. In the New Testament, the realm of these entities is actually the sky. A lot of people think that the demons and the fallen angels are in hell, but hell is actually where they are punished at the end of time. No one rules in hell. The worldview of the New Testament, they even call Satan the prince of the power of the air. Now, if you look at the sorts of terminologies that they use in the Greek language in the original New Testament, they really thought that the demons resided in the atmosphere between the earth and the moon. And that really fits the sorts of things that we see with the UFO phenomenon. What's that?
I was just going to say that's 7 flavors of freaky. So if we're going to suggest that some of this UFO activity has a demonic characteristic to it, and there's an association with UFOs in the Vatican, and obviously the Vatican wants there to be an association between them and any possible UFO activity because they're searching for it, preparing to baptize them and everything like that, then it kind of makes sense, because a lot of people think, well, the Catholic Church is the church that Jesus Christ founded and Peter carried out, and obviously that's not the truth. It's kind of the same thing as leading people away from the faith and setting up a false system. So there's kind of some parallels there, isn't there?
Yeah, I think so. And that's our thesis, is that, something the Bible talks about, a strong delusion that leads the world to believe the lie. Jesus said things like, when it got near the time of his return, that the level of deception would be so great that if it were possible, it would deceive even the elect. So we're talking about a really powerful level of spiritual deception. Now,
Well,
some of the
plus,
things
isn't
that I
there
talked
this kind of thesis, and we're kind of running out. I could talk to you for 2 days about this, but isn't there kind of
Right.
like this thesis that salvation might come in the arms of these aliens?
Well, certainly, that's a mythos that's been in our culture since the late 40s. That, basically that we discovered nuclear weapons and that we're about to nuke ourselves, so that these flying saucers showed up to actually save us from ourselves. So even in secular thought, there is a mythology concerning alien saviors that are really here to save us and help us spiritually evolve and not nuke ourselves.
Wow. Wow, obviously this is outside the realm of what we usually talk about on this show. We usually, talk politics or something, but this is obviously important because there are so many people who believe this and so many people who've been led astray, obviously, by the Catholic Church and stuff like that. And if they're in this position where they're starting to say, oh, well, UFOs are good and we're going to baptize aliens and all that sort of stuff, it's really leading to a very interesting place, which is why I'm glad you wrote this book. How do people get the book?
Okay, so you can see from that then how you get the demonic influence being connected into the UFO problem and then the Vatican. And so, taken by themselves, you'd say these things are just way too far out there to be the real deal. But Chris Putnam alluded to some passages there, and let me just go. He was referencing 2 Thessalonians 2, starting basically in verse 7. He was paraphrasing. So here's what we've got. For the mystery of iniquity doth already work. Only he who now letteth will let until he be taken out of the way. And then shall that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. Even him whose coming is after the working of Satan, with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this cause God shall send them a strong delusion, that they should believe a lie, that they all might be damned who believeth not the truth, but have pleasure in a lie, or in unrighteousness. So that kind of, I think, starts to really connect it. Is we see, a lot of people see the Holy Spirit as the thing that's holding back the Antichrist from coming in those passages in verse 7 there in particular. And then once he's taken out of the way, and since the Holy Spirit predominantly is in the church, the thought is once it's taken out of the way, then the Antichrist arrives. And what do you get? He comes as a strong delusion. And so this is where I question, is Barack Obama, for instance, manifesting, himself as being able to, be a strong delusion? Wouldn't UFO aliens arriving be much more compelling than Barack Obama, uh, you know, appearing on the scene and calling himself the ruler of the world or something like that? So that's just a little bit more weight, I think, toward what the story we're trying to build here. So let's kind of close here with what I got as my end scenario that wraps it up together here. So we've got the New Jerusalem was Jesus's plan with the church, and it comes down out of heaven, and that's the home of the saints in the end. And if the Antichrist and Satan are going to rip off and go in the place of God, would it not make sense that they bring their home down out of heaven? And here, is a clip of the pyramids coming down, and people have seen UFOs that are pyramidal shaped. And so, this is crazy, but only sort of crazy. And so you'd have an instant city out there in Babylon where there's only ceremonial buildings now. And then here we've got our friend Nimrod returning in his UFO coming down out of the heavens. And so I guess that's a a possible scenario. I just want to wish everybody a happy new year, and Lord willing, we'll see you on the next one, and leave me notes below. Thank you.